In CIST 2611, Chapter 10, we're going to look at VPN management. So in this chapter, we're going to look at the VPN management. We're going to cover the essential aspects of virtual private networks and the effective administrations. So the learning objectives in this chapter is going to focus on understanding the core functions of VPNs, common technologies, and key elements involved in their implementation and management. This chapter also discusses the best practices for managing VPNs. We're going to emphasize the importance of user authentication, encryption protocols, and access control. It also highlights the significance of VPN policy creation. The chapter also outlines strategies for defining user access rights, traffic routing rules, and security protocols. Also, this chapter addresses VPN deployment planning for enterprise environments. We're going to look at the need to assess network requirements, select appropriate VPN technologies, and design scalable infrastructure. We're also going to explore the general nature and source of threats against VPNs and provide insight into potential vulnerabilities and attack vectors. Lastly, we're going to look at VPN troubleshooting and the techniques to help administrators diagnose and resolve connectivity issues, configuration errors, and other challenges that may arise during the VPN operations. First, we're going to look at some best practices for VPN management. First, we want to make sure that we implement redundancy measures, and this is to ensure that uninterrupted VPN connectivity, such as backup servers or multiple VPN gateways, can be used. We'll also make sure we select a VPN solution that aligns with the organization's needs. We need to consider factors like the scalability, security features, and compatibility with existing infrastructure as well. Next, you'll develop a VPN policy. We want to establish clear guidelines and protocols for the VPN usage. We want to outline acceptable behaviors, security measures, and access control policies. We'll disable split tunneling, and this is to prevent potential security risks by routing all traffic through the VPN tunnel, and this will minimize exposure to external threats. We'll also want to implement security measures on the client devices, accessing the VPNs. This includes VPN or import protection, encryption, and also make sure we have our regular security updates. You also want to practice vulnerability management. So you want to regularly assess and address the vulnerabilities in your VPN infrastructure and configurations that you can use to mitigate those security risks. You also want to enhance authentication security by implementing multi-factor authentication methods, which will require multiple forms of verification from user that access the VPN. You also want to document your implementation plan. So you want to maintain that detailed documentation of your VPN configuration, the policies, procedures that will help to facilitate troubleshooting, auditing, and compliance. You also will continuously monitor your VPN availability and performance metrics to identify and address any potential issues. You want to do this so that you find these proactively. And then you'll also perform regular reviews, backups, and updates. So by conducting these periodic reviews of VPN configurations, performing regular data backups, and applying software updates and patches, you do this so you can maintain system integrity and your security for your VPN. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind when you're developing a VPN policy. You want to limit access to the organization's VPNs to authorized users only. So you want to make sure that only those approved individuals can connect remotely. Once again, you want to disable that split tunneling, and that prevents users from simultaneously accessing both the VPN and the public internet. So this reduces security risks that are associated with any potential exposure. You also want to clearly outline which classes of employees or users are allowed to access the network via the VPN. So you want to specify the roles and permissions accordingly. You also want to specify the types of VPN connections that are permitted within the organization. Now, these could be either the site-to-site VPNs or client-to-site VPNs, and you do this based on the security and operational requirements of your organization. Also, when you develop your VPN policy, you want to define the authentication methods that our users must use to access the VPN. Now, this can be your username, password authentication. It can be certificate-based authentication or multi-factor authentication. You also want to strictly prohibit the sharing of VPN credentials among users to prevent unauthorized access and maintain accountability for the user actions. You also want to specify the mandatory configuration requirements for the remote hosts that are connected to the VPN. This includes the necessity of having up-to-date antivirus protection, anti-malware software, host-based intrusion detection system, and a personal firewall that is enabled. You also want to prohibit the use of personal or non-company equipment for VPN connections, unless this is something that is explicitly permitted. So if the personal system is allowed to connect, you want to establish those minimum standards for their configuration and security measures. You also want to specify the required encryption level for the VPN connections. This ensures that all data transmitted to the VPN is adequately protected from any unauthorized access or interception. Now, you also want to have an approval process for network-to-network connections. So if that VPN will be used for the network-to-network connection, you want to define the approval process and the criteria for establishing such connections. Now, this may include assessing the security posture of the remote network and obtaining appropriate authorization before establishing the connection. Another thing you want to do is have that policy reviewed and approved by your communications, your legal, human resources departments before it's released. The key thing with policies is that you need to make sure you train your employees, your users on the policy. So you want to communicate that policy to the employees and conduct training at least annually. Now, when we look at developing a VPN deployment plan, a couple of things we need to consider. We need to consider what types of VPN connections does the solution support? Is it user access, site to site, or maybe it's both? You want to assess which encryption protocols are supported by the VPN solution. And you would do this to ensure that compatibility with the security standards. You want to consider how many VPN connections are supported. So you want to evaluate that scalability of the VPN and make sure that it can accommodate the required number of concurrent connections based on the current and future needs. You also want to measure the VPN's performance relative to a high-speed network to ensure that it meets the organization's performance expectations and it does not introduce any significant latency or bandwidth limitations. You also want to verify how well the VPN integrates with the organization's existing network. This includes any of the infrastructure such as routers, switches, firewalls, because you want to make sure that you have a seamless operation and compatibility with your VPN and your existing network infrastructure. Look at the support options provided by vendors, such as technical support, maintenance agreements, software updates. You do this, you will make sure that you have timely assistance and resolution of any issue that may come up with your VPN. Also, one thing to consider is how easy or difficult is the VPN to set up. And keep in mind, this includes this installation, configuration, deployment process. So you're going to do this to minimize implementation challenges. You want to look at the management features and capabilities offered by the VPN, such as a centralized management, monitoring, and reporting tools. Also, assess any additional features or functionalities that are offered by the VPN. So you can look at for multi-factor authentication, content filtering, intrusion prevention. You also want to determine whether the VPN supports failover or high availability configurations to ensure continuous availability and resilience against network disruption or hardware failures. And then finally, evaluate how scalable is the VPN. You want to make sure that it will accommodate future growth and expansion to the organization's network infrastructure. So some common VPN architecture we'll look at first is the bypass. So in the bypass VPN architecture, the traffic to and from the VPN and the internal network. This setup allows VPN traffic to directly access internal network without passing through firewall. An internal connected VPN, in this, the traffic to and from the VPN and the internal network is not firewalled. But however, the internet facing VPN connection is placed behind a firewall. And this is done to add an extra layer of security in an internally connected architecture. Now, with the DMZ based VPN architecture, this addresses the main shortcomings of those previous two architectures we looked at. So, this includes a firewall in front of the VPN to protect it from internet based attacks, as well as firewalls behind the VPN to protect the internal network. Now, one downside of this design is the cost associated with deploying multiple firewalls. Now, to deploy a VPN successfully, there's a couple steps that we need to go do. Is first we need to plan the physical location of the VPN. So you make sure that it meets the power, cooling requirements. You determine the IP addressing for internal and external network connections to the VPN. You want to allocate a pool of IP addresses assigned to clients when they connect to the VPN. Configure the firewall rules to permit VPN traffic. You also set up an IP address pools and assign those IP addresses to interfaces. Also, when you're configuring the VPN server, you want to establish a banner message and disable split tunneling. You also want to define the authentication mechanisms that are used by the users for connecting to the VPN. And also, you want to make sure that you follow your organization's change management policies during the VPN deployment process. Now, once the VPN is on the network, you want to create a pilot group to test the VPN deployment and ensure that it is functional. You'll also want to develop an operations manual that will detail VPN configuration, management, and the troubleshooting procedures. Another thing you want to do is create user documentation that will explain how to connect to and use the VPN. You'll establish support processes for addressing VPN related issues and any inquiries. You'll communicate the VPN rollout plan to management and the effective employees. This is to ensure awareness and the readiness for the VPN. You'll install a VPN client for any remote access users. Configure the clientless VPN software if it is applicable. Distribute authentication credentials, tokens, or other required authentication mechanisms to the users. And then finally, you want to provide training to those users. So you want to train those users on how to effectively use the VPN for the secure remote access. Now, there are threats that can arise to your VPN. Some of these include hardware and software vulnerabilities. So some of these may be a weak password. So the manufacturers may ship that VPN hardware with default passwords. These are passwords that are something to be easily guessable or something that's going to be widely known. Now, this poses a security risk if it's not something that is promptly changed. You can also have insecure default configurations or misconfigurations by the installer. So these incorrectly configured VPN hardware, this is something that can lead to vulnerabilities that attackers may exploit to gain unauthorized access. Now, on the software side of the VPN vulnerabilities, you may have an operating system vulnerability, which can be exploited by attackers to compromise your system. You can have incorrectly configured operating system settings that may create a security weakness that attackers can exploit. It may be incompatible or conflicts between the VPN software and other applications that are running on the system. And that's something that can introduce vulnerabilities as well. You may have unstable VPN software. This may experience crashes or glitches. That's something that can lead to potentially leading to security vulnerabilities. Also, the VPN software can be targeted by viruses and malware. These viruses and malwares will be designed to exploit the weaknesses and compromise the security of your VPN and network. Now, some of the vulnerabilities that are common to hardware and software VPN implementation include a denial of service attacks, where the attackers flood the VPN network or the server with overwhelming traffic, and it causes it to become unavailable to legitimate users. Failure to supply the security patches or updates to the VPN hardware or software can leave the systems vulnerable to known exploits and vulnerabilities. Also, attackers may exploit hidden or undocumented backdoors in the VPN systems to gain unauthorized access and controls over the network. There may be undiscovered or undisclosed vulnerability in the code within the VPN code base, and that's something that may be exploited once again to attack. You may have insecure configurations or vulnerabilities in the VPN client software. Weak and or easily guessable authentication mechanisms that are used by the VPN system can be exploited to bypass the security measures. Now, hairpinning, this occurs when the traffic is routed from a VPN client back to the VPN server. And this is potentially exposing it to interception or manipulation. Finally, another threat is the credential sharing. So sharing of your VPN credentials, when those are shared among the users or unauthorized individuals, this can lead to unauthorized access and also the compromise of sensitive data. Now, when you're considering VPN solutions, organizations often will weigh the benefits of commercial versus the open source options. So, here are some key factors for you to consider. The benefits of a commercial solution include the ease of installation and management. Most of them come with an installation wizard or user-friendly management interfaces that make them easier to deploy and maintain. Common VPN vendors typically provide dedicated management tools and platforms that offer advanced features for monitoring, configuring, and troubleshooting your VPN connections. Also, you can subscribe to a commercial VPN solution that usually includes access to vendor support services. These would be things such as technical assistance, software updates, security patches. Also, you may have available hardware maintenance with built-in support and maintenance contracts. So the benefits of an open source solution is low cost. So these are typically available for free or maybe a significant lower cost. compared to the commercial solutions. Open source VPN solutions provide greater flexibility and customization options. So that allows the organizations to tailor that software to their specific needs and integrate it with existing soft systems or infrastructure. Also, the open source VPN softwares can often be deployed on existing hardware, which eliminates the need for buying that costly proprietary appliance, and allows organizations to repurpose hardware resources. Now, open source may not include vendor support, but usually users can leverage online communities, forums, documentations. These all can be used for troubleshooting assistance, knowledge sharing, and also a community driven development. Now, anonymity is the ability of a network or system user to remain unknown. Now, there are tools such as Tor, which is the Onion router, or Viper VPN. These are designed to support anonymous access by routing internet traffic through a series of servers to conceal the user's IP address. These solutions do not always protect your privacy, since they primarily focus on hiding the user's identity rather than protecting their data or online activities. Now, privacy, on the other hand, involves keeping information about network or systems users from disclosure to unauthorized parties. Now, one effective way to safeguard privacy is through the use of a VPN, which encrypts the data transmitted over the internet. It makes it unreadable to anyone intercepting the traffic. So, by establishing a VPN connection, users can protect their online activities, communications, and sensitive information from being accessed or monitored by third parties. You want to find a balance between there to evaluate your needs. You also want to ensure the availability of VPN services, and to maintain security, there are several measures that you can implement. You can implement a 2 VPN hardware units or open source VPNs and configure each as a highly available pair. So this redundancy ensures that the VPN services remain accessible even if one of those units experiences hardware or software issues. You can also implement protocols like the Cisco Hot Standby router protocol or the Virtual Router Redundancy Protocol to manage failover between the VPN gateways. So these protocols allow for automatic switchover to a backup VPN gateway in the event that the primary gateway fails. And this is done to minimize service disruption. You can deploy load balancers to distribute incoming VPN traffic across multiple VPN gateways. So when one VPN gateway becomes unavailable, the load balancer automatically redirects traffic to the remaining operational gateways. You can maintain redundant internet circuits or connections to ensure uninterrupted VPN connectivity. So by having multiple internet connections from different providers or a diverse path, this ensures resilience against a network outage or link failures. The redundant internet circuits, this help maintain VPN connectivity, even if one of the connections experiences downtime or connectivity issues. Now, for successful implementation and utilization of a VPN solution, this user training is going to play an important role. Now, for the IT team and support staff, they must understand how the VPN solutions work. So they must have that comprehensive understanding, including its configuration, troubleshooting, procedures, and security protocols. They also need to be equipped with the necessary skills and knowledge to provide effective support to users that are encountering any VPN related issues or have any VPN related questions. Now, for the end users, There are different ways that you can train the end users for the use of a VPN. This can include training videos, conference calls, web conferences, classroom trainings. The training plan, though, should outline how new employees will be trained on using VPN solutions as part of their onboarding process. So, some steps for VPN troubleshooting. First, you want to identify the symptoms. So, you want to identify any unusual behaviors, error message, or connectivity issues related to that VPN. And then you determine the scope of the problem. So, you assess whether that issue affected individual users, specific locations, or the entire VPN network. After you determine the scope, you want to look for changes. So you want to investigate any recent changes or updates that may have triggered the problem. This can be in software updates or configuration modifications. If necessary, you want to reach out to the vendor for support and guidance for resolving the issue. Next, you want to try the most likely solution. So, based off your assessment, you want to attempt to implement the most probable solution to address the problem. So, after you implement the solution, you want to perform thorough testing to ensure that the issue has been resolved and the VPN functions as expected. Now, after you do this, you want to verify that troubleshooting steps you have taken did not inadvertently cause any new issues or disruptions. So you want to check, make sure you didn't break anything else. Document. So you want to keep detailed records of troubleshooting processes, including the symptoms observed, steps taken, and the outcomes. Chances are you or someone else will see the same problem again. Finally, you want to make a backup. So before you make any significant changes or adjustments, you always create a backup of any relevant configuration and data to mitigate the risk of that data loss or system instability. Now, generally, a VPN has two interfaces. You have the interface accessible from the internet and the connection to the internet internal network. That's something maybe going through a firewall. So you want to ensure that both the external port accessible from the internet and the internal port connecting you to the internal network are operational. You want to check that the VPN is still on the network. So you want to verify that both ports are functioning. You want to verify that the internal port is available. And that is properly configured to establish connectivity with the internal network. You also want to use the ping command from your Windows command prompt or from a Linux command line to test the connectivity between the devices. This helps verify that data packets can successfully traverse the VPN. Now, for validating the external port, you want to use the traceroute command. This is to validate the accessibility of the external port from the internet. The traceroute provides insight into the network's path that is taken by the data packets and allows you to identify any potential obstacles or issues. Also, you want to consider using internet-based trace route tools to perform remote trace routes from external locations. So this will help you in assessing whether the VPN is accessible and functioning as it's intended from the various geographical locations. So managing our VPN, this involves adhering to best practices, creating comprehensive VPN policies, carefully planning deployments, understanding potential threats, and effectively troubleshooting the issues. And we have covered all of these in Chapter 10.